Good morning. Welcome to the King's Report News Hour, 29th day, now the 8th month, in the 16th year of Chungi. I believe tomorrow we start a new month in the heavenly calendar. Let me just check that. Pretty sure that's true. Yes, tomorrow we start a new month on the heavenly calendar. Today's the final day of the 8th month. All right, let's take our normal sojourn around the kingdom right now in Chongpyeong, Tennessee, 36 degrees and clear. So a chilly morning, I guess. And today getting up to 62 under partly or plenty of sunshine. I'm sorry, plenty of sunshine today. Tonight, clear, breezy, late, a low of 42. And then Father's hometown, Cheongju, North Pyongan province in Korea. To right now, it's 36 degrees and clear, mainly clear and cold tonight, 26 degrees for a low. And then tomorrow, plenty of sunshine, high of 52. And in northeast Pennsylvania at the Chonigum Palace, it is currently 56 with light rain falling and periods of rain this morning, mostly cloudy, windy, and cooler with a brief shower or two this afternoon, high of 60. Clear and cooler tonight, low of 41. At the Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground in Limestone County, Texas, clear and 53. Breezy with plenty of sun, high of 92. Tonight, breezy and humid this evening, otherwise clear, low of 68. And then at the Suncheon Palace in Korea, clear and 59, increasing clouds, low of 48. Tomorrow, thick cloud cover, high of 64. And then at the Gunma Palaces in Japan, right now 65 and mostly clear, getting down to 50 tonight. Brief shower or two this evening, otherwise partly cloudy. Tomorrow, high of 64, mostly cloudy skies. And in Guangdong province, currently 74 and cloudy. Intervals of clouds and sunshine, windy and not as warm, high of 82, and then cloudy and windy tonight with a low of 63. Okay, let's go to Father's Word. And I'm in the book on human life and the world of the spirit. And let's see here. Okay, let's do this one. November 19th, 1998. And Father says, in the future, you will need to write your autobiographies. Each person will have to write their autobiographies. Um, so you'll have to write everything that you've done without any falsehood since the time that you joined the Unification Church. So obviously, he's referring here to first generation, although I think second generation can write autobiographies as well. And then when you go to the spirit world, you can put that autobiography before you and say, could I have done 내가 이런 역사를 할 수 있었느냐? Could I put that autobiography, place it before you, in front of you, and say, could I have done this kind of spiritual work? And then when you take this to spirit world with you, and then 160, 240, 360 spirit people uh, will be there, and you will be lined up. Will be lined up, and you have to go past them. And if you lie about anything, then you will uh, be struck by lightning. Well, basically, that's literally what he says. You'll be struck by lightning right there. You cannot fool anyone. You will not be able to fool anyone. All right. So yes, in spirit world, you're not going to fool anyone there because everyone knows what everyone else has done because everything is very transparent, right? When Dr. Lee wrote his letters from the spirit world, and you can read those. Where I think he said that people have these sign sort of a boards around their neck, and the signboards list the sins of that person. Oh, yes. So yeah, the spirit world can be very wonderful, but it can also be very um, um, inconvenient, shall we say? Inconvenient, especially for certain people. Yes. Uh, but not just for certain people, though. I think to for all of us to one extent or another. The king once talked about in his sermons. He talked about the public person and the private person, and he was making the point that everyone has, a in addition to the public persona, that is the persona that everyone sees, there's also a private persona. And he says that repenting and growing your character is a process of bringing those two together, so that in the end, your private persona becomes the same as your public persona. And he was talking about how, in Father's case, there was no difference. There was no difference between what he was like in public and what he was like in private, and there were no secrets to what to Father's private persona. Um, so I think so. What Father is saying here then is that you know um, that's basically what he's saying in this quotation about it's going to be completely transparent, and so our whatever sort of a aspect of our lives that we are keeping from others is going to all become very obvious and very open to everyone there. Okay. So that is why we need to continually work to grow our characters so that we can actually exist in that kind of environment. I mean, think what it's like. Think what it's like to be in an environment um, where there are no shadows, right? Where everything is transparent. Jim Carrey did a movie about what is it about a lawyer? I think it was that could not tell a lie. Do you remember that? Did you see that movie? I forgot the name of the movie, but um, was it Liar Liar? Maybe that was the name of the movie. Anyway, he made a very sort of a very funny comedy movie out of that situation. Uh, so he had to. I guess he was defending a woman uh, who was uh, trying to divorce her husband, but there was this prenuptial agreement, and he had to get her out of that prenuptial agreement. But anyway, it was that's kind of gives you kind of the feel for what it would be like to be in a situation where you cannot lie. It was very difficult for him to accomplish this person as a lawyer and not lie. All right, so let's go now to more serious matters, perhaps. Well, that's serious, I guess. But anyway, so uh, as we've been discussing today, Monday, October 30th, 20th. I'm sorry, 20th is the first day of the fourth plenum of the Chinese Communist Party, and it's not surprising that we pay attention to this because the world pays attention to what the U.S. Congress does, what the U.S. president does, because the U.S. has the largest economy in the world and also the largest military in the world. And so what the U.S. does affects the world. It used to be said, I don't hear this saying so much anymore, but it used to be said that when America catches cold, Japan comes down with the flu, or even worse, with tuberculosis or something like that, influenza. So China is now the second largest in terms of aggregate size, not per capita, but aggregate size. It's now the second economy in the world, and it also has a huge military. And so it's not surprising that people want to sort of get information from what's going on in China and what is actually going on. And well, unlike what we've just been discussing about the spirit world, the Chinese system is not transparent. It's quite opaque. And uh, we know that the fourth plenum began today. Okay, we know that. We know that Xi Jinping gave an address there. So apparently he's still not in hospital. you know, a heart attack or a seizure or anything like that. And I think the people who were uh, advancing that theory uh, need to need to go back and examine their news sources. We see a lot of stuff. We hear a lot of stuff. And when you see something on the internet, for example, the first thing we need to ask is, why should I believe this? Why should I trust this person who made this video and put it on the internet? Should I believe it simply because it's on the internet? Should I believe it because it fits in nicely with my narrative? I think when we are trying to evaluate the credibility of something, we need to ask ourselves, okay, who wrote this or who made this video and who's behind this? And is this someone that I've been able to trust in the past? So every time we read something, we need to look at the name of the person who wrote that, or the name of the publication that is putting this on their page, and ask ourselves, what is this person's track record in the past? What is this publication's track record in the past? So now we've had these YouTube channels that were pushing the idea of Xi Jinping having already been, he's under house arrest, he's had a stroke, he's in the hospital, so, he's already been removed from power or something like that. Da, 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 da. These publications now have shot themselves in the foot, so to speak. In other words, they sacrificed short-term gain, short-term sort of clicks now in order to uh, they gave themselves, so they wanted short-term clicks, but in the long term, though, they have undermined their credibility. Not everything they say will be false. Some things they say may be true, but how are we to know? How are we to know which is which? We need to go to publications and people who make a good faith effort to be accurate every time. They'll make mistakes, but we need to say, okay, but even though this person is wrong this time or he was wrong that time, but still, they're making a good faith effort to be accurate. And making good faith effort means, first of all, not making stuff up in order to get clicks. That's one thing. That's kind of obvious. But it also means checking, doing a professional job in checking information and not uh, putting stuff out until it's been confirmed. There's no purpose in putting stuff out that is unconfirmed, or it could be right, could be wrong. We don't know this, that, and the other thing. And so as we are all media consumers, right? We are consumers of the news. So as consumers, we need to develop this ability to sort of distinguish between credible sources and not credible sources. Where, of course, there's everybody's on a spectrum. Everybody's on a spectrum. We need to develop sources that we consider ourselves, based on our own experience, are credible, or at least most of the time. Maybe 80. I would hope that put, if I'm going to give some credibility, they are at least 90% of the time they're right. They're right. Okay. So these places that we're talking about, the stroke and hospitalization like that. Now, when I see them on YouTube, and I still see them on YouTube, I just bypass them. I don't even look. I don't even watch their videos now, because they have shown me that they were wrong about something big right now. Well, about Xi Jinping. Yeah. Anyway, here, Xi Jinping leader. Let's go through this story right now in the I think this is an independent, or by the publication, the British newspaper Independent. Chinese leader Xi Jinping delivered a speech on Monday. See there, right there, right? That's big, right? He delivered a speech at the opening of a significant Communist Party meeting where a draft plan outlining the nation's goals for the next 5 years was set for approval. A brief dispatch from the official Xinhua news agency said that Mr. Xi's expounded on the party leadership's draft proposals for upcoming 5-year plan, which will cover 2026 to 2030. However, the agency provided no specific details regarding the proposals. The latest plan emerges amidst growing challenges and uncertainty for China, including a persistently sluggish economy, foreign restrictions on its access to the latest technologies, and high tariffs imposed on its exports to the United States. A Xinhua editorial indicated that the plan should focus on high quality development and technological innovation, while also ensuring national security is protected and the benefits of economic growth are spread fairly and more widely. That's these kinds of statements that we need to look at and sort of analyze a bit. So, high quality development, what does that mean? Um, I think that Xinhua is going to have to explain that a bit, but I think it means, you know, development. Well, I don't know. High quality development, but more sort of capital intensive economic development. I would think sort of a high value added economic development. Maybe that's I suspect that's what they mean. High value added economic development. Um, and technical innovation, while also ensuring national security is protected. Ensuring national security is protected. This is interesting because right now, who is threatening to invade China? I'll give you a minute to think. The answer: no one. No one. No one is threatening to invade China. What? Japan? What? United States? The United States not threatening to invade China, and Chinese know that. Russia? No, no. Russia's afraid that China might invade them, but they're not. Mongolia? No, of course not. So India across the Himalayas? Well, there is some territorial dispute down there, but that's not a big thing. Vietnam? No, even though Vietnam defeated China in the war in 1979, they're still not threatening to invade China. So who's threat? What is this whole thing about national security that China's always referring to? Okay, translation. This is actually the security of the Chinese Communist Party that they're worried about. Okay, that's. I think this is a code word for the security of the position and power of the Chinese Communist Party. That has to be it because that's the only explanation. Because no one is threatening to invade China. Why? Why would anyone want to invade China? Okay, ensuring national security is protected and the benefits of economic growth are spread fairly and more widely. So that's an interesting statement because the Chinese Communist Party is always bragging that, oh, we brought what is it they say, 400 million out of a poverty or something like that, or is it five? I don't know. They can make up numbers as they go along, but there's still a very large portion, perhaps a significant majority of Chinese who are in very low uh, um, economic development still. Uh, People who cannot afford to have hot water and uh, and people who are still living in quite frankly quite primitive environments and situations. So is this what that is referring to? Quite possibly, yes. Uh, and it also, I think, is sort of they put this out so as to appease the critics of the Chinese Communist Party within the population of China. And there are those people, they may not expressing it, but they are still there. And I think the CCP is acknowledging that and saying that, hey, we're going to do better in terms of leveling out the economic development. Um, there will be hardships and obstacles on our way forward, but we may encounter major tests, the editorial said, in discussing economic and national security goals. Um, Again, I don't know what the national security goals are. Right now, I think apparently the national security goals are to be able to destroy any country in the world at a moment's notice. But that's not exactly defensive, is it? Okay. Okay, so hardships and obstacles on our way forward. All right. So clearly, that's could be sort of reference to President Trump's tariffs on our way forward. So where are we going? Well, we say on our way forward. Where are we going? Well, ever since Marx wrote to Das Kapital in the 19th century, the way forward has always been the same, and that is world domination. Domination. And Marx was very clear, and Lenin is very clear, that the communist system can only work if the entire world is communist. And so that is the way forward. Okay, so that is our way forward. And so there are going to be some hardships and obstacles on our way forward. Yeah, you betcha. you and I and a bunch of other people are trying very hard to create more and more obstacles on the Communist Party's way forward. That is true. And we may encounter major tests. Well, yeah, you betcha. We're gonna test you. We must be prepared to deal with a series of new risks and challenges. Okay, good luck with that. Analysts, investors are watching the meeting to look for clues about how the plan will balance economic and security interests. Again, what security interest does China have? Who's trying to destroy China? Well, no, it's the Communist Party's power and position. And to what extent the plan will call for structural changes to boost consumer spending and manage an aging society. Yeah, China's economic development is at that stage, and Japan went through this a similar situation, and they're still going through this situation where they need to boost domestic consumption. Okay. We looked at the portion of the GDP of the United States occupied by consumer spending, right? It was something, what was it, 75, 80%, something like that? An astronomical, huge amount. And China, of course, is nowhere near that. Japan also, I think, is not near that either. But anyway, so to boost consumer spending and manage an aging society. This week's 4-day meeting, so it's going to be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, brings together about 200 voting members and 170 alternate members of the Central Committee of the Communist Party. The body will approve the draft 5-year plan. Now, isn't it interesting that the 5-year plan is being um, approved by what? Not the national legislature, but actually it will be approved later. It'll be rubber stamped by the national legislature, but it's being worked out by the Central Committee of the Communist Party. And this just illustrates to you how the government is actually under the Communist Party. They do the bidding of the Communist Party, just like the military is also not the military of China, not the military of the People's Republic of China, but the military of the Chinese Communist Party. Oh, I got cut off. Uh, it's interesting, isn't it? Every time I talk about this kind of stuff, I seem to get cut off. Just coincidence, I'm sure. Hmm. All right. Well, thank you, wherever you are, for your love. Okay. Oh my goodness. All right. So anyway, but let's what were they saying? What were they saying? What was their phrase? Da, 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 da. Hardships and obstacles on our way forward. Okay. It looks like we're encountering certain hardships and obstacles on our way forward as well. All right. All right. Anyway, we all have our job to do. Okay. So let's continue with our job. Oh my goodness. All right. I want to look at another story on the same meeting because this is kind of important. And so I'm going to go to CNN this time. Roiled by purges and buffeted by US frictions, China's leadership meets to chart country's rise. Now, CNN, I think, is making a headline that obviously Xi Jinping would look at, and he would certainly appreciate this phrase, chart the country's rise. I might actually call it to check the country's demise. In other words, they're basically fighting a rearguard action where they're trying to slow down the decline of their country. Anyway, let's see what CNN has to say. So he's convening a political meeting and and provides an opportune moment for Xi to showcase China's brand of highly choreographed economic planning and his tight control over its political apparatus. Days before a potential meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump on the sidelines of an international summit in South Korea. And apparently now Trump has confirmed that that meeting is actually on in some point in South Korea. I don't think maybe not necessarily in Gyeongju where APEC is happening. It may happen in Seoul, but it seems that that actually is happening now. It also underscores the sharp contrast between the two countries as they compete across tech and trade arenas. Gathering Communist Party elites will review China's upcoming 5-year plan, an economic blueprint whose direction is strictly dictated by top leadership in the authoritarian state. Well, they should add top leadership of the Communist Party, not of the government, but of the party, right? So strictly dictated by the top leadership of the Chinese Communist Party. Meanwhile, the US government shutdown stretches toward its third week as democratically elected lawmakers remain locked in a standoff over spending in the year ahead. So isn't it so much better, right, to have an authoritarian system where you don't have government shutdowns, right? CNN. This is being written from Hong Kong. All right, this is being written from Hong Kong. So I think that's why it has this sort of lean towards the Chinese Communist Party. I think that's the reason that they're sort of kind of giving this contrast that is favorable to the Chinese system. The plenum will be closely monitored by outsiders for clues about the inner workings of China's opaque ruling Communist Party. Yeah, ruling is right. Yeah, that's a big word there. Intrigue heightened on Friday when state media announced the ousting of China's number 2 general, highest ranking casualty yet of Xi's ongoing anti-corruption purge of the armed forces. And as I said, they say, oh, well, look, someone close to Xi is being purged. Well, maybe he's too close, right? Maybe he's too close. Maybe he was developing too much of a power base. I don't know. I'm not an expert, but I think there are all sorts of explanations for that. The conclave comes at a critical time for Beijing. China's leadership sees itself as navigating an increasingly hostile global landscape with U.S. trade frictions and mounting restrictions on Chinese access to Western technology, which also, uh, while also grappling with deep-seated economic challenges at home. Yeah, and those economic challenges are growing greater all the time. We saw a few days ago how the consumer prices have been going down recently. China's economic growth slowed to its lowest point this year in the third quarter, according to data released by the National Bureau of Statistics on Monday. And okay, all right, well, let's go ahead and read it. Which reported 4.8% growth year on year, down from 5.2% in the previous quarter, as those pressures weigh on the economy. Yeah, okay, let's all right, let's just sort of laugh it off and keep going. As I've explained, even the Chinese leaders in the past have said that figures announced by the Chinese government are false. And yes, figures announced by the American government are also false, but there is a matter of degree, all right? I mean, come on, 4.8. Anyway, so we know that it's down from last year. We can say that. We can surmise that. They would not lie, and try to hide the fact that they are actually going up. They're having to admit that they're going down, but probably the decline is probably a lot more than just 0.4%. More than 300 full and non-voting delegates of the powerful Central Committee will gather in Beijing for the closed-door plenum, one of 7 meetings typically held within 5 years between party congresses. The 5-year plan in focus this week is expected to emphasize China's economic security and technological innovation in sectors like artificial intelligence, quantum computing, new energy, and biotechnology. It will run from 2026 through the end of the decade. But that won't be the only item on the agenda, and the conclave may also include a personnel reshuffle if new officials are appointed to key roles vacated by those purged. Right, okay. And here they're making air fryers in China. I wonder if these people even understand what those machines do. Anyway, okay. Full details of the upcoming 5-year plan will not emerge until after it is approved by China's rubber stamp legislature in March next year. But Xi has already given strong hints about his priorities as he looks to adjust China's economic strategy to ensure high quality development for the rest of the decade. Here we go again with that phrase, high quality development. Okay. It's a decade that Xi could well see out in power. Okay, so yeah, so CNN I think is being responsible here, saying yeah, Xi could remain in power for the rest of the decade. Yes, the strongman leader broke precedent to remain head of the party and state for a third term starting in 2022, and has so far avoided elevating an heir apparent. She earlier this year called on provincial leaders to spend the next 5 years focusing on the development of emerging and future industries and breakthroughs in core and cutting edge technologies, while also coordinating development and security and considering internal and external risks. All right. Interesting here, we don't see the term national security. Right. China has already made sweeping advances in high-tech industries like electric vehicles, solar panels, and batteries, and is fast catching up with the U.S. in other advanced areas of semiconductors, AI, and biotech sectors included in the current 5-year plan, which ends this year. But the country's industrial innovation has also been marred by production overcapacity. A surge of production has fueled frictions with trade partners that accuse China of flooding global markets while also contributing to persistent deflation and price wars between competing firms at home. China's economy also needs rebalancing as it faces a prolonged property slump, persistent deflation, weak consumer demand, and high youth unemployment. Okay, maybe a Freudian slip there. What they mean is high youth unemployment. That's a typo, I assume, as well as longer term concerns like its rapidly aging and shrinking population. So, yeah, this is a list of challenges and obstacles, I guess, that is quite serious right now for China. China's slowing growth in the third quarter relative to the rest of the year increases the pressure on the Chinese Communist Party to accomplish its annual growth target of around 5%. Right. Officials on Monday attributed the third quarter decline to a complex and severe external environment. Okay, that's actually President Trump's middle name, I think. Complex and severe external environment. That's his nickname. Yeah, this is a clear reference to Trump, including the impact of tariffs. You see that on the global economy, as well as China's economic transition between new and old drivers of growth. Despite the economic headwinds, many observers expect Xi will largely look to stay the course he's already charted for China while making some targeted adjustments. There are few reasons to expect that a new 5-year plan would deviate, considering that Xi Jinping has been in control of the whole system now very definitively and doesn't need to have a big headline initiative at this stage, said Jacob Gunter, who heads the Economic and Industry Program at MERIC's thinking tank in Berlin. So I guess they had to go all the way to Berlin to find someone who doesn't think Xi Jinping is lying flat on his back in the bed, maybe. Gunter said to expect some signaling in the coming plan around boosting consumption and addressing involution, a cutthroat domestic competition linked to overcapacity. But signs of a deeper shift, if it comes, would include meaningful efforts in the coming months and years to expand the social safety net and tackle issues around subsidies and overinvestment, among others, he said. All eyes will be on any personnel changes that could take place this week, including potential appointments to the powerful Central Military Commission, which oversees China's 2 million strong armed forces. So this is the Central Military Commission of the Chinese Communist Party. So the Chinese Communist Party controls the military through this CMC. Of course, right now the head of the CMC is none other than Xi Jinping. The CMC has been rocked by Xi's anti-corruption purge, with 3 of the body's 6 uniformed members ousted since 2023, including Ho Weidong, the number 2 general. The announcement of his removal Friday confirmed months of speculation about Ho's fate after he vanished from public view last March. He also served as a CMC vice chairman, was also a member of the 24-member Politburo, the second highest echelon of Communist Party leadership. And there he is, right after he heard that he's being no. He's attending the opening session of the National People's Congress in March 5, 2025. His ousting from the party was announced alongside that of fellow CMC member Miao Hua, who was removed from his military position in June, as well as 7 other officers. All were suspected of severe duty-related crimes involving exceptionally large amounts of money, according to the state media. The shakeup leaves an unusual number of spots open in the party's Central Committee, which began its term in 2022 with 205 members and 171 non-voting alternates. About a dozen seats are expected to be filled by alternate members at this plenum. Okay. It's not clear whether Xi will choose to refill the ranks of the CMC, which he chairs, or whether he will prefer to keep his close hold on the smaller group. Existing vacancies on the Central Committee and the potential for other disciplinary moves this week could bring the biggest personnel shakeup at the plenum since at least 2017, according to Neil Thomas, a fellow on Chinese politics at the Asia Society Policy Institute. Record purges strengthen, not weaken, Xi's grip over the party and the People's Liberation Army. Every Central Committee member knows their future hinges on staying in Xi's good graces, he said, right? So no indication there that one of the people to be removed this week would be Xi Jinping himself, which other people have speculated. And shall I say speculated, or simply come out right out and said openly without really much or any sort of a backing or evidence thereof. All right, so we will continue to watch what goes on this week because it is it is an important thing because we want to see the 1.4 billion or whatever number, whatever the true number is. We want to see Chinese people liberated. We want them to be able to exercise their innate talents given to them by God in a free and responsible atmosphere. All right. So we will see how that goes this week. All right. Okay. All right. So let's. I think that's enough for that. Okay, well, let's see. I have this other story about China. Well, let's do this other one and then come back to it because I want to make sure I come to this one about Zelensky. So Zelensky met Trump at the White House, and I was asking, remember last week, why is Trump bringing Zelensky back? And turns out that he brought him back to kind of put some pressure on him to accept Putin's peace deal. Right? That looks like what happened here. Donald Trump was reportedly engaged in a heated exchange with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, where the latter's request for Tomahawk missiles was denied. Okay, well, I believe that was a good decision. I think Putin already indicated that if Ukraine got those missiles, that this would be a significant escalation. And I don't think we want that war to be escalated any further than it already is. The U.S. president publicly urged Kiev and Moscow to halt their devastating conflict after an extensive White House meeting with Zelensky on Friday. Despite seemingly amicable discussions in front of the press, the encounter was far from cordial compared to their February meeting at the Oval Office, marked by several tense moments. Trump's exasperation with the ongoing conflict has been evident in the 9 months since his return to office, and he now appears to be leaning towards urging Ukraine to abandon its efforts to reclaim territories lost to Russia. According to the Financial Times, Trump was cursing all the time during the meeting, which frequently escalated into a shouting match. He cautioned Zelensky that Russia would destroy Ukraine if he did not agree to Russia's conditions for ending the conflict. And this was the expectation that I think most of us had at the beginning of this conflict in 2022, that Russia was going to, just sort of walk through Ukraine in a couple of weeks, or 3 or 4 weeks. But of course, Ukraine has held out a lot longer than that. And so I think Trump is saying, hey, you know what, you guys have done well, but you need to basically quit while you're ahead. Seems to be the basic message that he's giving. Reports suggest that Trump wanted Zelensky to surrender the entire Donbass region, but they ultimately agreed that the U.S. would support a freeze on the current front lines. So kindly, and this is what I've been saying all along, the Korean Peninsula solution, right? Where in 1953, July 1953, um, the UN forces on the south and then the North Korea / communist forces in the north said, okay, wherever we are right now, that's it. That's the front line. And we'll build a demilitarized zone there and see what happens. And so now, what is it now? About 72 years later, well, because it's still there, but anyway, it's better than fighting like that. Trump also indicated to Zelensky that he is likely to approve the sale of long-range Tomahawk missiles. Um, Unlikely, I'm sorry, he is unlikely to approve the sale of long-range Tomahawk missiles, a weapon that Ukrainians believe could significantly influence Putin's willingness to negotiate, reports the Mirror. Zelensky, at the onset of the White House discussions, proposed a deal where Ukraine could supply the United States with its advanced drones in exchange for Washington selling Kiev Tomahawk cruise missiles. However, Trump expressed reluctance to deplete the U.S. stockpile, a shift from his previous indications of considering sending the missiles to aid Ukraine against Russia's invasion. I have an obligation also to make sure that we're completely stocked up as a country because you never know what's going to happen in war and peace, Trump publicly stated. Yep. So unlike China, right? Unlike China, there are plenty of forces out there in the world that want to um, have a shot at the United States. Well, China being one of them, China being one of them, and North Korea being one of them as well, and maybe a few others. We'd much rather have them not need tomahawks, which we'd much rather have the war be over, to be honest. A European official present at the meeting alleged that Trump warned Zelensky to strike a deal or face annihilation. If Putin wants it, he will destroy you. Well, that's interesting that a European official there. I wonder who that could be. Anyway, I guess we're not going to know. At one point, Trump reportedly tossed a map of the front line onto the table, expressing his frustration by saying, "This red line, I don't even know where this is. I've never been there." Shortly after the meeting, which lasted more than 2 hours, Trump took to social media to declare enough blood has been shed, with property lines being defined by war and guts. They should stop where they are. Let both claim victory. Let history decide. Later, shortly after reaching Florida, where he has been spending the weekend, Trump called on both sides to stop the war immediately and suggested that Moscow should retain territory it has seized from Kiev. Well, at least temporarily, at least for now. Like you said, let history decide. So that's basically what happened in Korea as well. So North Korea claimed and was given the territory north of the demilitarized zone, and South Korea was given the territory that is south of the demilitarized zone. So Trump is, he's pushing, sometimes he's pulling, sometimes he says, I give up, I'm going to walk away. You guys just keep on fighting until one of you gets too tired. And so he's been frustrated. And this seems to be um, a really difficult situation for him to resolve. But as the Finnish president was saying yesterday, Trump's the only one who can do it. No one else in the world is going to be able to bring this to a close. And so we'll see what happens, unless. But I've been saying that this is likely to go on until either Putin or Zelensky somehow passes from the stage. In other words, one way or another. There are many ways that can occur, but one way or another. Otherwise, I see this war continuing, unfortunately. And so it's important that the United States not get involved, because if we do, it's going to be another 20-year war for us. Either that, or we blow up the world, which of course apparently nobody wants. But the fact that nobody wants doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. Um, all right. Right, let's now go back. Let's go back now to that story about China that I wanted to do, but wanted to get to Zelensky first. And that is this idea that um, China is threatening to sort of cut off rare earth minerals to the world, or to any country that they choose, and any country that refuses to bow down to them. But here, the Washington Examiner is pointing out, which I also pointed out, that they may not be able to follow through on this threat. Right? Let's see what the Examiner is saying. China could find it impossible to execute its plan to impose global export controls on rare earth elements, its latest threat against the United States in the escalating trade war between the two powers. Not just the United States, right? Basically the entire world. The maneuver by China tightening export controls on rare earth elements presents a major risk to the U.S. and its allies that rely on China for the minerals, which are critical to the manufacture of a range of high-tech products. It is a significant point of leverage in trade talks scheduled to take place this month, and drew a threat of major new tariffs from President Donald Trump. Yet analysts say it would be a challenge for China to go through with the threat, especially with the plan to enforce them extraterritorially, meaning that China's licensing requirements could apply to products made outside of China if they include Chinese source minerals. So, for example, semiconductors made in Taiwan. It looks like China wants to say, hey, Taiwan cannot sell its semiconductors to the United States or Japan or anyplace else if they are using more than 0.1% um, of their semiconductor is the rare earths from China, from our country. So how is China going to measure that? Is it 0.1 or is it 0.009, or is it, what is it? How are they going to measure that? The export controls themselves are set to go into effect next month, but extraterritorial enforcement would go into effect at the start of December. What it essentially means is that let's say a company in the Philippines exports electronics to the United States, and this company in the Philippines gets access to some of those materials in order to put it in their products that they then export to the rest of the world, said Colin Hendricks, a senior fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics. They still have to get an export license for that product to send to the United States of America. And if they do it in contravention without getting that kind of license, they can imperil the entire country's access to those resources, Hendricks said. So, as I said in the beginning, this is not just threatening the United States, it's threatening basically every country in the world. So they want every country in the world to bow down to Emperor Xi Jinping. So Xi Jinping is playing this card now. They're basically, in terms of a poker game, they're going all in and hoping that everyone else will fold. Derek Scissors is a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, where he focuses on the Chinese and Indian economies and on U.S. economic relations with Asia. Scissors pointed out that following all of those exports would be a challenging task for Beijing. It just becomes almost impossible for China to track all those shipments, the source Scissors said. Supply chains are complex, making tracking challenging. A massive bureaucratic workload would come with implementing such a regime. Well, bureaucrat in China, creating more government employees is something that they do very well. China has only in recent years begun trying to set up an export control framework, and its tracking and licensing mechanisms are still under development, according to a recent Morgan Stanley report. China has dominated the rare earth market for years and accounts for about 80% of U.S. imports of rare earth metals and compounds. Demand for the metals is only growing as clean energy products such as wind turbines and electric cars, which use the metals, become more popular. More ominously, the controls would apply to magnets used for weapons and defense systems such as the F-35 jet fighter, Tomahawk missiles, and radar systems. Still, the problem for the Chinese government is that they would have to monitor not just direct shipments from China into the United States, but also those to third-party countries, because if China doesn't have an extraterritorial element to these export controls, companies would just transship. Yeah, you just ship from Mexico, ship them to Mexico. Do to the rare earths what you're already doing to fentanyl. Kind of, right. They're actually providing Mexico with precursor elements, not the fentanyl itself. And then they come up to the United States. That's the obvious example, he continued. So it's always been about the December 1 deadline and the extraterritorial element, and that is really, really tough. But the process will be easier for China if the companies voluntarily fall in line and start applying for export permits. They want firms to go along with this to give them the information necessary to enforce the controls, which they cannot do now, Scissors said. So that's the play here. It's not like tomorrow they can actually effectively block rare earth shipments. That's a bluff, but it's not going to be a bluff forever. The new export controls are a response to months of Trump pushing more protectionist trade policies and tariffs across the globe. But the stocks of non-Chinese rare earth companies rose because of the tensions. By Monday, MP Materials, a U.S. mining company in which the Trump administration has taken an ownership stake, was up more than 21%, while another domestic company, Energy Fuels Inc., rose 17.5%. USA Rare Earth Inc. was up more than 26%, while Critical Mineral Corp surged a staggering 32%. In the wake of the escalation, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said this week that the United States government has a dozen different countermeasures that it is prepared to deploy, noting that the administration hopes it doesn't have to pull those significant levers, and expressed optimism about de-escalation. Bessent specifically mentioned the natural resources used in the production of plastics, jet engines, and related parts, and the hundreds of thousands of Chinese students studying in the U.S. as pressure points for Beijing. Amid the dispute, the president said he still expects President Trump to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping in South Korea in the coming month. He will be meeting with party chair Xi in Korea. I believe that meeting will still be on, President said. So that's that, right? So we'll see what happens with this when the two men meet. And I guess we're assuming that this is going to happen, and it's not going to be a body double or anything like that. So again, the people who are going on about Xi Jinping being out of the picture and everything like that are going to have to recalibrate their reporting. All right, let's see here. What else do we have here? Let's see here. Okay, we got a few minutes. Let's go to the Epic Times, see what's happening there. Okay. Weekend internet outage, right? How AI is becoming a weak link in cybersecurity, right? And this guy, George Santos, yeah, okay. Trump let him out of prison. But this man, um, I don't know. It seems to be one of those people that feels that they could just lie their way through life. Now he says he's going to push for prison reform. Repentance is an understatement. It's like I have been dealt a second chance, the former lawmaker said. I don't know. I have a feeling he's going to get himself back in prison because, Trump did not um, absolve him of future crimes, only the past crimes, or at least he commuted the sentence, saying that, okay, well, he suffered enough. Um, he said he has no immediate plans to run for Congress, but did not rule out a return. I think his line, his election slogan is going to be, "Hey, Congress is full of crooks already. Let me join them," or something like that. Anyway, let's. All right, so yeah, Sanae Takaichi, she's on the cusp of becoming Japan's next. Well, I'm not sharing this with you. I didn't share George Santos with you, did you? Well, he does deserve to be shared. So apparently, Takaichi is going to be the next prime minister. I think it's going to happen tomorrow, the 21st. And I know some people were very worried that this might not happen, but uh, I've been trying to emphasize that this kind of sort of a negotiation and this kind of twists and turns is what I've seen the LDP doing, for years and years, for decades and decades. And so, um, I, but my basic argument was, who else? There's nobody else. There's no alternative. There was no alternative. The opposition really was not in a position to put up anyone else. So we'll see. All right, let's see here. The guy who founded Wikipedia wants to see a radical change in it. And Trump says Israel Hamas ceasefire is still in place following strikes in Gaza. All right, that's all the time I have today. All right. So, see, tomorrow is what? Tomorrow's Tuesday? Yes, tomorrow's Tuesday. So I will see you then. God bless, Godspeed. May his kingdom come quickly.